Hi, my name is Dave. I'm a part-time reseller. I own a business on eBay called Return of the Vintage. I sell antiques and vintage collectibles and toys. I've been doing this for a little bit over 2 years part-time. I've got a full-time position, but really have enjoyed doing this as a hobby on the side, and I've had a lot of success. I've actually made over $100,000 in total sales over the last 2 years. So I figured just to put together a video, maybe to inspire or help those that are maybe getting started in 2025 from my personal experience, and just put together a list of 10 things that I think might be beneficial for someone getting started from my own personal experiences. So for me, the first thing I would say is start slow. Don't rush once you get started. My experience was just trying to find something around the house that I knew the value of, something that was an opportunity just to get something posted, understand the process, understand eBay without having to worry about making too much money or something not selling. So for me, I collect vintage hats, if you maybe see in the background here. So I had a couple extra hats that were duplicates that I knew the value of and was ready to get rid of. Those were my first sales. Ultimately, going through the process and not having to worry about all the other to-dos was really helpful for me. Just use something to start in the house to see if it's the right thing for you. So other than that, in terms of when you start doing sourcing, I would say to start with small buys. You may see a lot of things when you go out to garage sales or whatever it might be that looks super attractive, but don't go buying too much early because you need to learn about what is going to sell. And if you go and buy all kinds of things and you come back and you look to sell them, you just won't have understood what works best when you go to eBay. So I would say don't buy anything too large. For me, when I first got started, I was actually at a garage sale and I bought like this big framed glass thing of different patches, and it was 15 bucks. But for me, it was really a good experience to sell each of the patches individually, understand the process before spending too much money. I did make some mistakes on other things and big buys that I'll talk to in a second, but I would say to make sure you don't spend too much money once you get going. Research, that's number three for me. I think that's a big part that I enjoy doing, but something that you really need to do before you start putting too much on eBay, because you want to make sure ultimately that it's going to sell. So there's different ways to do some research on particular items. One of which is to use eBay to see what is called a sold comp, a comparator to what you're looking at that may have sold recently, and compare that to active listings. So what you do is you just go to sold, you can see the list of items that it sold, how much they sold for. You can filter them to most recent, you can filter them to most expensive, but it's important to compare what's sold to what's listed, because if there's 100 items that are sold and 50 that are listed, it's something that people are really attracted to and they're going to buy quickly. But if you see something that's sold once and there's 100 listings, there's not going to be much interest in it. So don't spend too much time going through the whole process of photos and listing if something's ultimately not going to sell at the end. Another way that you can research is to use what was called TerraPeak, but it's ultimately eBay research. You can pull down to research items and what they've sold for over the last 3-year period, which is really helpful to see a trend of maybe what an average price was over that time period. And then as you get further along, you can use third-party sites. So for me, I use WorthPoint, takes back more of the information over a 10, 15-year period. And for me in antiques, it's really helpful because I'll find one of a kinds that haven't sold over the last 3 years, but may have sold 10 years ago, and give me a sense of what the price would be. Once you do get started and start listing items, the first thing is the photos. So you want to really make sure you take some time to get a good photo. It doesn't matter what you use. I used my iPhone. I still use my iPhone after getting started. It was helpful to use an iPhone because I can take the photos straight from when I take them over to my iPad or over to my iMac, and I'm able to put them straight onto eBay from there. So the impact of a good photo, though, it's a big difference. I relate it to going and looking for a used car online. Like, you could see one car that's got photo outside in the snow and isn't very attractive, and then you have a same car with a photo inside in the dealership, looks super nice, but the one that's outside might actually be a better car than the one that's inside, but you'd never know because the photos are a vast difference between the two of them. So I would say make sure you take the time. You don't need to invest money in it. You just have a nice background, nice white background is what I'd recommend. And then just make sure you get really good, clear photos, and it'll really help with your sales. When you look at number five for me is some of the listing shortcuts. When you do go to list, it's best not to start with a blank canvas. What you can do is do something called sell similar. So if you go into eBay and you look at your item, you can see what was sold recently, and then you can use that as a template and duplicate that to instead it's kind of like a head start as opposed to starting blank and having to put everything in there yourself. So you can, when you go to sell similar, you can see which items sold recently, and you can see which items sold at the highest amount. For me, I look at the ones that sold at the highest amount. Ultimately, for me, I think that means it's just the most quality posting because it drew the most interest. So that's the way I do it, and I sell it similar. For me, a majority of the items that I post are buy it now. And you'll probably hear a lot of people that say just do all buy it now. For me, in antiques, sometimes I find like one of a kind items, or sometimes I find something that I'm not sure of the value even after my research. So I do auctions because there's going to be a lot of competition for it. One of my examples for me is I had found a baseball glove, a very rare baseball glove that I wasn't sure quite how rare. This was last year, and I posted it on auction. And what I thought was going to go for maybe $50 ended up going for $1,200. And from that experience, I learned which baseball gloves are valuable, but also that lesson of if I don't know the price and I'm willing to give it a shot at auction, you never know what it's going to go for. So I see that a lot in auctions. I know a lot of other people prefer not to do auctions at all, but if you have rare items, antiques, or vintage collectibles like myself, sometimes it's good to use. And also, I think it draws more people to your store. So if you have something that's at auction, you may be drawing people that are antique dealers or enjoy a certain type of antique that you have. And because there's auctions, it's going to attract more people and they may buy something else in your store as well. For me, then, number six is to create a shipping chart. Shipping, it can be intimidating when you're getting started. We're not Amazon, we're people at home. It's hard to know like what is UPS, what is USPS, what is priority, what is ground advantage, and what are the dimensions. And so for me, I created a shipping chart to understand how much things were approximately. And so ultimately, when you break it down, there's UPS, there's USPS. Those are the two that I use. UPS, I only use for large boxes, large items, heavy items. And then for USPS or the post office, there's two that I use for the most part. There's something called Ground Advantage, which is your basic. I use that probably 90% of the time with the post office. And then there's one called Priority. And Priority is usually what I'll use for more expensive items or heavy items that are going across the country. One of the things that it was important that I found out at the beginning is this differentiator at 1 pound of weight. Anything below 1 pound, anything 15 ounces or less, is going to be vastly different in pricing from 1 pound or 16 ounces or more. So that's just a number to consider when you're looking at certain items and how much you're going to price them at. But I created a chart just to give me a good sense. And then 2 years in, now I have an understanding of what a good price would be for something. For me, I always underprice the shipping as opposed to overprice the shipping, just because I want a buyer to be happy and I don't want to overprice for something. Now, I learned that too at the beginning. When I first got started, I put a value at a for shipping for a pedal car. If you can believe it, I shipped the pedal car because I thought it was a great deal. I bought it for 25 and I sold it for $250, but I actually made a box for a pedal car and sent it, which I will never ever do again. But for me, the shipping cost was so hard to determine that for me, I'm not selling anything large again. But from a shipping perspective, you really need to know how much something's going to cost, and then that way you put yourself in a better position when you put the cost on there. Something else to consider too is where you live. So for me, I live in the Boston area, so I usually do what's called a flat shipping rate when I make my listings as opposed to a calculated rate. But for me, I need to consider if I'm shipping something from Massachusetts to California, I need to make sure that I'm putting a number that makes sense. That if something going to California is going to be really expensive. Now, if you live in St. Louis or you live somewhere in the Midwest, you may not have to have that extreme because you could be shipping to California or you could be shipping to Massachusetts. But where you live is also important to consider if you're going to use flat rate shipping cost. In terms of number 7 for me is getting your shipping materials. So you really don't need a ton to get started. For me, I used like a lot of boxes around the house, a lot of Amazon boxes, whatever my wife was spending money on, had those extra boxes around the house to use. And you just really need shipping tape, you just need measuring tape, and then you just need a scale to help understand what something weighs before getting it sent out. As you get more advanced and go along, you can start using more strategies as to how you go about getting your boxes. For me, after some time, I started investing in more bulk boxes just because I knew I wanted to continue in eBay, and getting around the house and finding boxes that were misshaped and trying to fit things in that didn't fit the box was just, it was a pain and I was losing money. So for me, what I do is I invest in different size boxes. I have probably 7 or 8 different size combinations, everything from a 4x4 up to probably like a 16 by 14 by 3, and everything in the middle. And for me, I prefer to buy boxes that I can customize to the items. So I have a hat box that I can send my vintage hats in. I have a really sturdy 12 by 12 that I'll send some of my antique stoneware, anything that needs a good box that's of a good size that I can pad up real nice and throw in like a 12 by 12. I recommend going out using Amazon to find these bulk buys. Or for me, I also use Uline sometimes, which is more of a larger organization specific to businesses, but I can get large bulk items sent to my house at a reasonable price. One other thing too, in terms of materials, is how you're going to print out your labels. So when you get started, when I got started, I just used like a regular printer just to print out the labels. Then I just taped them to the box. That got old pretty quick once I realized that I wanted to invest more time with eBay. So I bought a used Rollo printer, which is a nice label printer, makes things so much easier. So if you know that you're going to be doing this more and you're going to invest more time in eBay, I highly recommend getting a printer like a Rollo printer as opposed to using your personal printer, because it just spits it out. You stick it right on the box and you're good to go. In terms of like my number 8, I would say to figure out your sourcing strategy. Everyone goes about it differently. For me, I would recommend going and trying a little bit of everything. So try yard sales, try garage sales, try estate sales, try flea markets, try antique stores, online estate sales. That way you can maybe find where you feel most comfortable. So for me, like I don't go to Goodwill, I don't go to Savers. That's just not my thing. I'm sure it's profitable. A lot of people love to do that, but just not my thing. So for me, I really focus, and I found my niche in garage sales and estate sales. So for me, and that's where I'll find the best antiques. That's where I'll find the best vintage items. So that's like my niche, if you will. And for me, I try to do as much research in advance as I can. Over time, you'll get a better sense of what something costs. But for me, if I see pictures of what's going to be at a yard sale or what's going to be at an estate sale, I'll do as much research in advance just to see what something could be going for that could be attractive to go and target when I go to the event. Usually, if someone has a couple pictures of something really attractive and looks like it's going to go for a lot of money and be a good flip, they'll probably have more of those things. For me, one of the experiences I had was I saw some photos for a garage sale of vintage tools, and I did some research and I saw these vintage tools that I'd seen through Facebook of the posting at the garage sale. They looked like I'd never seen them before, but they were going for a lot of money. So I targeted those when I first went. I ended up with a large bulk buy of these antique tools that I was able to sell over time. But if I hadn't done the research ahead of time and saw those at the front end and did my due diligence, I would have gone and probably just walked right past them. And over time, from a sourcing perspective, you're going to get a better sense of what sells, what doesn't sell. But to start, I would just recommend doing as much research in advance before going through your sourcing to help you make better informed decisions when you go. My number 9 is define your business. For me, my focus, my niche, my goal is all in antiques, vintage collectibles, vintage toys. For me, it's not necessarily as much about like the money. It's more just I enjoy selling those items. I enjoy researching those items. I enjoy passing those items along to someone else because this is a little bit more of a hobby than it is to me, than maybe to others. And for me also, I only sell items above $15. I'd sold items a lot less expensive as I was getting started. And it just, for me, it was a lot of time that was committed to smaller items that I'd make $1 or $2 or $3. And so this year I committed to just selling everything that was over that $15 mark. And so for me, it really helps me to target when I go to different yard sales or estate sales or whatever it might be, really focuses my core in that area. If I happen to have someone that gives me items that are outside of that core, I could sell them, but for me, I really try to brand my eBay business specific to the antiques and to collectibles and vintage toys and those types of things, so it keeps me focused. So I would say maybe find your niche, find what you'd like. Is your goal ultimately to make as much money as you'd like and go to the Goodwill stores, go to the Savers, do the research, get all that? Or is it more of a hobby similar to me and find your niche that you feel like you just enjoy doing? And my number 10 is the most important. It's learn from your mistakes. I say fall fast. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make bad buys. You're going to put the wrong shipping price like I did and end up eating a lot of cost for a bad shipping amount. You're going to make all kinds of mistakes along the way, but don't get discouraged. Just learn from them. So for me, that was an early learning experience with a lot of mistakes. But ultimately, if you don't learn from them, you're just going to repeat them. So I guess maybe my big experience early was I made a bulk buy of all these Star Wars items. It spent like $1,500 on these like new Star Wars items, the used Star Wars items, ever from 1977 to 1984. Seemed awesome, and I bought this huge collection. And when I ended up getting the collection, I realized that those collectibles were a small portion, and a lot of it was not something I could sell. It was newer items from the 90s, or it was just random parts. So for me, I ended up getting my money back, but I spent a lot of time doing it. And for me, I was drawn to how great this collection was and how attractive it was, not necessarily thinking, am I going to spend a lot of time to have to resell this to get my money back? So for me, that was my one of my biggest mistakes. I made all other mistakes along the way, but I'm not going to do that again. So good. So those were my top 10. My hope is to continue to make videos of my experiences along the way, hopefully help others, maybe doing some shorts on specific antiques that I like, maybe expanding a lot on these individual portions of my experience. I've really enjoyed it over the last 2 years, and my hope is to impart this knowledge to others. So thank you. If it's something that you want to explore further, feel free to like the video, feel free to subscribe, feel free to share any comments or questions. Like I said, I've had a good experience and hopeful to help others along the way. Thank you so much. See you soon.